What's common is that growth hurts. What's happening is your current self has to die. This self that you know has to die in order for my future self to start getting fed to grow. And so in that, your subconscious doesn't want today's self to die, right? They're like, wait a minute, we're comfortable here. All good. Wait a minute. No, 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 no. But today's self needs to die in order for that future self to come alive.
Welcome back to the Relaunch Podcast. Oh, do I have a special guest here today? Somebody that I had the privilege of meeting about a year ago. And I heard her speak and I thought, you know what? Her story is intriguing, inspiring, insightful. And then I went home and I learned even more about her. And have you ever seen someone, heard them speak and just been like, you know what? Somehow I'm going to meet her again. I'm going to work with her. And guess what? Those type of things you ask. And if you ask them the right way and you use the law of resonance that resonates with the other person, whatever you're trying to bring in, it ends up happening. And so today we have the incredible Amilya Antonetti, one of the world's top experts in human behavior and strategic advising. You've probably seen her on Oprah, Dr. Phil, Steve Harvey show, and she's worked with icons like Steve Harvey, Mike Tyson, and even brands like Listerine, Cold Stone Creamery. And I happen to know there's somebody else that we can't even mention that's so big. And Amelia's philosophy, every day is an opportunity to relaunch. So get ready to be inspired and to now hear from Amilya. Amilya, I'm so excited you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. And again, I saw you speak and you captivated the room. And so I want to kind of go back in time. And you often hear on the show that I talk about the significant relaunch that really changed everything for you and brought you to where you are. But I'm also going to include, you I think in 2025 you're going to be the keynote at Davos and you're keynoting everywhere. Like you're just this phenom. And I want to ask you, as you're talking about your significant relaunch, sharing with us kind of how'd you do it? How are you setting yourself up for success? So we have a lot to cover, but let's go back in time and let's talk about that significant relaunch.
Yeah. So I think that for every phase, life is not a straight line, right? I would think that every time I stepped up in, let's say, success, there was a trade. And I always, one of my most famous quote is, don't ask me about my success, ask me what I traded. And that has been absolutely positively the gut punch that you have to make those decisions. So if we take, what was the last significant relaunch, I would have to say it's the death of my husband, my children's father. So 2 years ago, didn't see it coming, didn't get the memo. And it was a suicide. And given what I do for a living, the fact that, behavior is kind of my shtick, it really took me back to my core, right? To go, well, how does that happen given my expert? How can I be an expert at anything if this just happened? I can't even put words to the shock, the absolute shock. And at the same time, needing to be there for my children, because as much as I was this has got to be a twilight moment, this can't really be happening. Also being a stable force for my kids, right? So they're, and again, in it itself.
How old were your children when it happened?
My daughter was 15, and my son was 28. And so, just again, just like a domino factor. So first of all, he and I were best friends. He's been in my life for over 20 years, and a fundamental piece in the family equation, meaning I was primary income and he was the stay at home everything. And so not only is it a piece out of the foundation for myself, but for my kids, I had to rush back in to go from being primary income to primary parent. And not like I had babies, you know what I mean? Being primary parent when you're not that role, going, hi, people are like, this is what daddy does. And I'm like, yeah, well, and so learning our change in the family dynamic. My son at the time wasn't even here. He was in Thailand, to be able to go, okay, do I call him home? Do I not call him home? Like, I want him to live his life to get, but then I was like, his sister started on such a slippery slope. I was like, you need to come home. Like, we need that male presence in the house. Like, so just between me trying to get my foothold, the kids getting their foothold, his decision changed everything in my life, in my business, in my influence in the world, in my role with them, myself as a woman, right? I mean, I can't tell you how much it shaped me as just being a female, right? I was like, well, what kind of woman nurturer am I that he opted out, right? Like, everything about it was, okay, I have to take a step back here and really examine, who am I? What do I stand for? What is and isn't significant? And what is the role that I'm going to play going forward? Which meant I have to think about what was going to get exchanged, right? There's only so much time. There's only so much energy. There's only so much, right? And so reprioritizing everything, because the thing that mattered to me most was them, because they couldn't process what was happening. But at the same time, I've got fiduciary responsibility. I run a company, employees, teams, I have investments. Like, I can't just go, hey, guess what? I need some time off. Like, it doesn't work that way. Right. And so my whole life, like, I just, like, if they say, sometimes the world opens up and you get sucked into it. That's exactly, I felt like I was in Stranger Things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what my next right move is. And so these last
So I
24
think
months,
it's interesting what you said at the very beginning. Don't ask me about success. Ask me what I traded.
Mhm, mhm,
And now all of a sudden, your husband
mhm,
commit suicide
mhm.
2 years ago, 24 months ago, and you are left with this idea of like, okay, I have to step into many new roles that you didn't, right? So
Mhm,
we talk a lot about mass, we talk a lot about identity, and
mhm.
you know, it's really interesting. And I remember you saying that you felt like that you had failed in
Oh,
some way
I
around.
still do. I still, I still feel like in some way, not only failed him, but failed my children. I failed myself as a woman. I'm still wrestling with the fact that it feels like a failure. Now I can intellectualize, not my fault. I can do all of those things. Intellectually, I can run that course. But at the end of the day, my heart tells a different story. My heart tells a different story. Could I have done something differently? Could we, as kind of the people closest to him, is there something that could have been said? And I understand. I work with a ton of veterans. I understand decisions are decisions. You got to respect that person's decision. But sometimes it is a hard nut to swallow, to say, what were you thinking? And I understand that in that moment, in those moments, that he thought at that time he was doing us a favor, that a life would be better without him. I know that that was the final, like, they will be better off without him, which goes back to my overachieving self, sometime being so in control and so much of a person who can, execute and build life and such and such. Like, did I build our life beyond where he felt he was relevant?
That's a really interesting question to have to,
Mhm.
especially when you deal with human behavior. You talk about it. You're like an expert on all these shows, and now all of a sudden, how are you when you now are being interviewed and you're talking about it, and how have you shifted
Mhm.
in what you are now saying? As you said, you work with veterans, you work with so many different people. What has changed?
I think the up close repercussions of decisions that are generational. He didn't make a decision for just this moment. He changed the trajectory of who I am, who my kids will be, who the community is. It's transcending. And so it's not that I didn't have that knowledge before.
Mm.
Now it is witnessing and experiencing on a multitude of levels. And so I do believe with every blessing, there's a curse, and with every curse, there's a blessing. I believe totally in, the exchange of giving and receiving, right? And I believe I was faced with my greatest work. My greatest work was there's one thing when you say, there's another thing when what you do and what you say aligns. And so I had to get very real with my own reflection and say, here's the work. Here's the work. And to sit and allow it to enter, to not self medicate, not deflect, not distract, to really just sit in it and also understand the significance he played in my life. Like, you don't understand how relevant you are into somebody's life until you're gone. Like, we talked 100 times a day. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just 100 times a day on things you don't even realize you're communicating, right? Because our commitment was so much with, the co-parenting of our children. And so without even thinking about it. And so there's still days where I swear he's going to walk through that door. And I had to say, okay, how can I show up in this? Because I wasn't going to be present with my children and myself as if it didn't happen. And so I wanted to keep him in the conversations. I want to keep him in the decisions. Wanted to be able to say, okay, hey, I'm missing daddy. Let's go to his favorite restaurant. Or, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. Do you want to talk about it? Like, to keep the conversations open. We have a tendency when there's loss to try to fill it with all the other side of life and try to not ignore it, but just pretend that life goes on, right? Things go on and, time heals wounds and stuff like that without realizing you're going through. It's not something that will heal. It's something that will transform, right? It's going to transform. Now, where I have power and control is how does this trauma transform into my life so that it becomes an energy of service. But in doing that,
So
I had to
before
get
you,
really
so
real with me.
before you go into this,
Mhm.
I remember I've trained extensively with Dr. John Gray, who wrote
Oh,
Women Are from
love
Venus,
John.
and
Yeah, love John.
he talks about a broken heart
Hmm.
and how if you had a broken arm, you would put a cast on it and you would realize it is in the process of healing. But
Hmm.
our heart, we sometimes have to put a wall up and we got to keep going. And you made a comment at the beginning that was talking about you still were like this powerhouse. You still were the CEO of this company. You still had a ton of employees. And you couldn't just be like, hey, I'm done with that. I got to focus over
Yeah.
here.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of people right now that are going through significant relaunches that
Hmm.
are truly debilitating, whether it's, family with themselves being sick, whether it's financial situations. And I would like to ask you, what advice do you give them? Because 2 years ago, you couldn't just say, I now have to 100% focus on my kids. I still have to run the business. How do you separate the two? How do you keep going? And how do you allow for the relaunch of your husband's passing to, as you said, you have gone through your own self-development.
Hmm.
How did you do that?
Radical honesty, literally radical honesty, to be able, not with only just myself, with others, and very, very hard minimum standards and boundaries. And so, not having to justify my suffering to you or anybody else, right? Because suffering doesn't mean I'm not productive. I'm extremely productive. I'm probably the most productive person you'll ever be around. And how to still be productive and not have it being some type of message of the degree of my mourning, right? So I can be productive and still be suffering from a broken heart. And that is part of making those boundaries and guidelines of what I will and will I not do. And who I will and will not do it with. And so I still have a commitment to investments, company, teams, partnerships, relationships like that have huge significance to me. And that doesn't have to stop because I am suffering. But what it does have to do, it has to be modified. And so this
I want everyone to hear what you just said. It has to be modified.
has to be modified. Mm-hmm.
I remember when my mom passed after a year of cancer, and I went back and went to a meeting, I think the next day, and people were like, "Ah, are you sure you're able to do this?" I'm like, Abel, I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
She would have wanted me to do this. I'm not a bad person because I'm choosing to be here. But people feel that way. And I remember I felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
I felt guilty when my husband said, "Hey, I want to take you away for our anniversary." And I'm like, but my mom, she
Right.
could die any day.
Yeah.
And my mom said to me, she's like, "Hilary, go,
Mm-hmm.
go on this weekend trip. You need it. And by the way, I'm not going to die this weekend." She died about a month later, but she said, "I'm not going to die on
Right.
you this weekend." But people don't realize, they think that there's something bad about you if you choose to continue to have your life, enjoy your life. I have to say, my work gives me so much pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
It allows me to breathe.
Right.
And I hear that in you.
Well, I think it's about learning that, and that's why I go back to like minimum standards and boundaries. Your meaning that you have on something has no relevance on what it means to me. Right. And so not allowing that permission, that judgment, right? Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an idea of what was best for the kids, best for me, best for the business. Like everybody's got 2 cents. And I appreciate, right, your effort, but it has to also be wanted and welcomed. And so I had to be able to go and go, here's my priorities. Not that there's just a priority, there's several priorities that I have because I'm a responsible human. And then to be able to say, okay, while I'm moving from here to there, grief has a weird way of showing up. It's weird. And it shows up without warning and in triggered in very unique ways. And I have to be able to allow it in and then ask for a moment to say, listen, this is all about me. There's nothing to do with you. I'm triggered right now. I just need a second. I need to step away for the day. I need to step out away for the moment. I need whatever, or I can't show up as my best self in this project because for some reason it's triggering for me. Like I had to get radically honest with being human and saying there are things that I know about me that have changed forever. And if that change bothers you, offends you, conflicts with you, I'm okay, girl. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Not everything is meant forever. And there are relationships that had to change because life changed for me and I didn't get a vote. And so
Let's
being
talk about
okay
that,
with
because
that.
I remember you talked about this, girlfriends.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Tell us about how you did, because you mentioned the idea, and personal development is very individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my gosh, no, there are no two programs I put together for people that are the same.
No.
Everyone is unique and different.
But what's common is that growth hurts. If you're truly growing, you're in pain. If there's no happy growth, you know what I mean?
Explain that.
Right.
Explain that.
Well, because you're what's happening, from a behavior standpoint, what's happening is your current self has to die. This self that has to die in order for my future self to start getting fed to grow. And so in that, your subconscious doesn't want today's self to die, right? They're like, wait a minute, we're comfortable here. All good. Wait a minute. No, 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 no. But today's self needs to die in order for that future self to come alive. And that process hurts, really hurts. And in all of the awareness that happens along the way, because what makes you you today is formed on a bunch of beliefs that in a second are going to die.
Mm.
And that when you talk about girlfriends, that's
Yeah, go back to the girlfriends, because this was a really interesting perspective for me. I like literally took a deep breath after I heard you say it.
well, and again, when I say these things, people think I don't like men. I love men. I love everything about men. I find men so absolutely entertaining and fascinating. But it's been my girlfriends that have always been my first call. When life smacks me, and life has smacked me hard more than one time, it's my girlfriends that I call, because there is a unconditionalness that happens in true friendships between women. You know, women are fundamentally gatherers, right? To gather. And that gathering is a reflection of who we are in that circle, right? And so much between women goes unspoken. And again, it's not a judgment that women are better. That's not what I'm saying. But if you've ever had a child and you were near a woman, all of a sudden she's like, here, automatically knows, let me have this, let me do, like, instinctively. You can be in a kitchen with a woman. All of a sudden she's like chopping, slicing, like there's an automatic rhythm between feminine energy with other feminine energy. And again, not to say that women don't have I have a lot of masculine energy, but that connection that women have, women need women, just like men need men. Women need other women. And we have put the union of female relationships inside of the bubble of masculinity, trying to make it a transactional relationship. Feminine energy is not transactional. Transactional is masculine. And so in these times of true growth, true awareness of self, reflection, births and deaths and unions and partnerships, I have found it's been my girlfriends. My girlfriends I can call hysterical with making no sense at all. And she will just sit there. She won't ask me what's wrong. She will just listen to me cry.
But
Right?
you also have selected out.
Oh, yeah. The filtering system is.
This is where I was like really interesting, because
Mhm.
during my divorce, during my kids' health issues, during my mom's death, my dad's death, I mean, my cousin's suicide, I mean, all these different things, I really realized who was really there.
And that is shocking. It's shocking to me who you think will be there and who actually shows up. It's baffling to me, right?
Yeah.
The unseen and unspoken support that is around us at all times that often goes unseen. But during crisis, it magically appears. And you realize, wow, I didn't even realize we were that close. Right? I didn't even realize. And so I always say that trust is earned, and trust is earned repeatedly. Repeatedly. You're not friends and now we're friends for life because we just became friends. The friendship is meant to be nurtured, harvested, and grown. And the way it grows is through crisis. It's through crisis.
It is. And being there for that person. Mm-hmm. And not showing up 6 months later and say, oh, I'm so glad that you're doing okay.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, thanks.
Right. And and like I said, it's always not about the outside element. It's about the internal, right? About, do I like who I am when I share space with you? It's not people ask the wrong question. It's not if I like you. And that's for boys or girls, right? It's not if I like you. Do I love you? That question is useless. The question you need to ask is, do I like me when I'm with you? Because often the case is, I don't like who I am when I'm with you. And therefore, although I have these feelings for you, you don't help me get to my best self. I don't like who I am when I'm with you.
Okay, but let's say, because right now, whenever you're listening to this, we're deep into the holiday season. What if there are people that you have to be around that don't
You
turn
don't
you
have
into
to.
who you
There's
are?
no such thing. Unless they're children, you don't have to. It's a choice. Family does not get a free pass. Your
Mhm.
family, if they're adults, must also meet your standards. And if they don't meet your standards, then they don't have the privilege to have access to you. I definitely have family members who do not get the pleasure of my company because we do not agree on how to live our lives. We don't agree on how to treat each other. We don't agree on the effort that is required. I require
It's your
effort.
choice. So it's your choice not to go.
Absolutely. And I'm honest
Okay.
about not going. Until you can meet me at my level, I will not be here. I'm not participating. I'm not bringing my kids to participate in something where you're not willing to match effort for effort. Now, that doesn't mean I can't have a conversation with you and say, I agree to disagree on politics, or I agree to disagree on how I educate my kids, or whatever the case might be. I can agree to disagree. But what I will not budge on is if you don't value and celebrate who I am in your life, I will give no other F. Why would I give more of something that you don't even respect now?
Right. So let's talk about this. When you now are going out and being a keynote and they're paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're doing all these incredible things, how has your message changed in the last 2 years? What are you talking about these days?
Well, I spend a lot of my time on people problems, right? Because my training and my experience throughout my 38, 40-year career has always been people have been my secret sauce to my success. And people are your greatest asset. So they're either moving you towards your goal or they're keeping you away from it. So understanding what's happening. As a behaviorist, I always say what you think is happening is never what is really happening. That's not what's happening in the conversation. And so the skills to scale are hard ones, right? So I tell people, listen, when something comes up, your quickness to defend yourself and your depth of defending yourself tells me how far you will scale. Because if you're more committed to defending yourself than being able to give the validity of what's being said, then you will be in your own way. Because in all criticism, there is some inkling of truth. Can you sit in it? Right. So that's why when somebody says, well, you can be condescending, Amelia, you can be direct, you can be intimidating, you can be masculine, you can be all I can sit and go, I can defend, I can explain why, I can do all those things, or I can go, tell me more about your experience of me. I want
Mm,
to know, how are you experiencing me? And then I have to ask myself, was that my intention? Is that how I intended for you to experience me? And if the answer is no, then to be able to get invited into the opportunity to change how I show up and to be honest that, oh, I'm practicing this. I get it all the time. People say to me, if you were more feminine, then you would be more easily received. And I said, that's probably true. There's probably some truth in there. However,
mm,
by whom? Is the people that I want to be received by my
mm,
audience? Because the answer is probably no. And so people are like, what? And I'm like, you're making the assumption that I want to be received by the masses. I don't. I want to be received by people who are the doers, not the talkers. Because the
mm,
doers understand, in order for me to hold my role, I have to use a lot of my masculine energy during decision making and being objective and all of the, this, that, and the other thing. Now, I have a huge, goofy, ridiculous feminine side to me that I love and that I protect. And I have it blocked on like where I'm using my masculine energy followed by my feminine and where I use my feminine followed by my masculine. So I know that they're without having practicing both, I can't scale. I need both. But I will tell you that going into some of the situations that I'm in on a daily basis, especially since I'm in crisis management, leading with my feminine often is not the right decision. So I'm consciously making the decision to show up in a more non emotional, non-connect. But there's other things when I get into the space of innovation and creation and development where I lead with my feminine. So it's the question is, do I have both? Yes. Yes, I do.
How do you tap into both? And this is where I am super excited
Mm-hmm.
to let people know that our big event in 2025
Mm-hmm.
in September called Relaunch Her, you are going to be a keynote speaker
Yes.
talking amongst hundred of, really these incredible women, impact millionaires, millionaires in the making,
Uh-huh.
to share that, because so many people think it's got to be one or the other. And we're going
Yes.
to have you go really heavily
Mm-hmm.
into your feminine energy, but then also teach people how to tap into masculine on demand when you need it.
Absolutely.
Human behavior, that is your expertise. And I'm beyond, I just got chills. I'm beyond excited to have you. One thing you do differently than a lot of people is there's a lot of people that get up and they keynote and they talk, and you kind of walk away, and you actually engage the audience. You get them
Games,
thinking.
tools, exercises. Yes,
Yeah,
because I think
workshops. We're like, hey, I'm not going to be up here and just talk to Hilary. I'm going to be like, okay, here's how you're going to implement this now
because
and
the
get
game
people.
is your reflection, right? So if I give you a behavior game, then the reflection of the game is your current truest self. And so you then have the opportunity to go, I like that aspect of self and I'm going to keep it. Or there's an aspect of it that needs either to be, stopped or put on hold or swapped, right? Start, stop, swap. And so we're constantly making these decisions subconsciously. What I do is I just bring it to the light to be able to say, is this your intention? And is it serving you for where you're going? See, a lot of the things about myself served me to get me here, but they won't serve me to get me to tomorrow. And so I have to make the decision to put some of these things down, but to put them down with the honor and the respect that they deserve. I love that part of myself. It got me here, but now it's free to go to serve somebody else as I bring on another part of my personal development of where I'm going. So this whole trauma with losing Anthony has really reconnected me in a way of looking at my feminine energy differently than I'd looked at it before. Not that I wasn't looking at it, but I can see a different aspect of it that I didn't prior to. And so I have to honor him with that gift to be able to say, wow, he gave me a gift to look in parts of me that I didn't know was there. I didn't know it was there.
Evolution, yours, and how much you have grown with this is incredible. And when you spoke about growth is painful,
Oh,
and
that
you go
it is.
you,
Yeah.
breaking through your comfort zone, breaking into a new identity, it is, I mean, it's like, the the snake and losing that layer of skin. And if you've ever really heard about it, it's painful. The butterfly, the caterpillar, it's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And it really is this whole thing. There's a great book out there, The Butterfly Effect,
Yes.
of how, when you spread your wings and when you flap them, and how the ripple effect. And I believe, I call it the relaunch effect,
Mm-hmm.
and how a woman evolves through her relaunches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you hit the stage for Relaunch Her, and you're talking about the different phases of Amelia, the different identities and the identity crises that have gone through,
Mm-hmm.
I am beyond like excited to have people, sitting there listening, engaging with your content, engaging with the workshops, be able to literally transform
Mm-hmm.
in that hour. I mean, it is going to be so powerful. So again, we have to wrap up. It has been a pleasure. I am
I'm so excited.
deeply like just connected to you and your story and your relaunch and your transformation and really your vulnerability, because we barely touched on the badassness that you are and how much you've done, and your history and your bio did nothing to even talk about it. But your evolution will serve to ignite others. And so in September, again, you're going to be on the stage and not even on the stage, in the room
Mhm.
with women to really help them get to the next level. And so, Amilya, thank you so much for being here. And where can people find out more about you? Get in your presence before they're going to be in your presence, Amilya.
Amelia.com. Like I always say, if you can spell my first name, you can find me on any social platform. And I try to stay active, but Amelia.com, same thing too on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I really try to stay connected because I love to listen. We're all on this journey together. Everybody has something to share and to contribute. And you never understand, just talking about your butterfly, you never understand when you bump into that missing piece, the piece that you were meant to connect with, that's going to catapult you to the next level. And so I am very excited about September, but more than anything else, it's about building the relationships for tomorrow.
So great. Amilya, thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Everyone, as you've heard through this, it's about live now, love now, relaunch now. There are things that you're doing that you know can absolutely change the trajectory of your life. And it's time. It's time to push through. It's time to growth is pain, as Amilya said.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side is pretty remarkable.
It is.
So try it, relaunch now. Let us know if there's a way that we can help you. Again, Instagram, Hilary DeCesare, and we look forward to having you back here next week. Take care, everyone. If you like this video and want to get more like it, head over here.